Hello everyone, Bendy Bono here, and would you believe it, I finally got rid of those annoying gray boxes that were over here that were just because I have my video settings kind of wrong or whatever, and I was too lazy to take the time to fix them. But now they're fixed, so everything's better, I hope. Anyway, here we are in the treatise on creation. We have now finished the first part, the production of creatures. We are now into part 2, the distinction of creatures, which starts off with question 47. The next time we will move into the distinction of good and evil. Question 47, the distinction of things in general, another 3-article question, but unlike last time, there are not 5 trillion objections for each article. So, let's start with number 1, whether the multitude and distinction of things comes from God. In other words, what this means, it's kind of talking about how there's a lot of different things, there's multitude and distinction between them. Is that part of creation, or did God make one thing and then multitude and distinction come from something else? Okay. Alright, so objections. God is supremely one, therefore he produces one effect, and multitude and distinction are not from him. So multitude and distinction would seem to contradict God's oneness, or at least the oneness of his effects. A representation is assimilated to its exemplar. God is the exemplar of its effect. Therefore, as he is one, so is his effect. The means are proportional to the end. The end of creation is one. Therefore, in other words, convergence, right? Therefore, creation is one. But, watch out. Genesis 1, of course, in the different days, speaks of God dividing the day from the night, right? You know, all those verses from Genesis 1. So, that would seem to indicate God does create multitude and distinction. Alright? Argument. Some claim that the distinction of things is due to secondary causes. You know, like, as all that would mean is just reasserting the claim he's arguing against what we just said, that God creates one thing and then secondary causes result in there being many things after that one. This cannot be, since creation involves the diversity of things, and creation belongs to God alone. Also, the perfection of the universe, which comes from God, involves diversity of things. And he goes into a little more detail on that, if you are so inclined to figure out what he's saying there. Alright, objections answered. God acts by an intellectual form. Since his intellect understands many things, he can create many things. And that goes all the way back to the divine ideas in, I think, in question 15. Let's see, yep. So, you know, like we've talked about before, Aquinas, these are all interconnected. He's building one thought on top of another. So even 30 questions ago, you know, that's relevant here. Number 2, this objection would be true, that a representation is assimilated to its exemplar. God is the exemplar of his effect, therefore his creation should assimilate to him and be one, just as he is one. That would be true if the representation reflected the exemplar perfectly, and nothing in creation, even creation as a whole, can represent God perfectly. And number 3, if means are equal to the end, only one is needed. But creatures are not equal to the end of being one. Therefore, many creatures are needed to achieve that end. Okay? Alright, so, multitude and distinction come from God, but that introduces a problem. Why? Because where there's multitude and distinction, there is, by definition, inequality. And does that inequality come from God? Alright? Well, let's find out. So the best produces the best. When things are the best, one is not greater than another. So they'd say, no, that inequality is not from God. Equality is the effect of unity. God is one, therefore he made all things equal. And then maybe the big kicker here, God is wholly just, therefore no equality exists in his creation. So, I mean, this is kind of an interesting issue. You know, whether we talk about, obviously this is speaking in a broader sense about, you know, inequality within all of creation. Why are humans smarter than dogs, right? But this also applies, you know, not just in comparing creatures, but comparing people. Why Is Albert Einstein's intellect so much greater than mine, right? Or to put it more in terms of the problem of evil and the conflicts created by that, what about disabled people? What about, people who are born with horrible diseases? All of those issues that come in there. Or, to push it even further, what about people born with evil tendencies? Of course, we all have evil tendencies, but, sociopaths or whatever. There's inequality even within the species and races, right? So what do we do with that? Well, okay. So, argument from authority, we go to the Book of Sirach, 33:7, speaks of creation being unequal. There's probably a lot of places you can go with that. All right. So, this idea, Aquinas tells us, originally came from Origen, who proposed this idea specifically for what we were just talking about, to deal with the problem of evil. So, Origen said, God made everything equal, and inequality as we perceive it exists because of free will. However, Aquinas says, were that true, God could not have pronounced corporeal things good, since they are unequal with incorporeal things, namely angels, right? Therefore, the inequality that we perceive, not to take out the question of free will, which as we can see we're going to get to there, the distinction of good and evil, not to take out the presence of evil, but at its root there is an inequality in creation that's part of the wisdom of God. Okay? So Aquinas would, of course, say that we're not talking about evil at this point. That we're going to get to, but we are talking about, why can God say the angels and humans are both good? Creation is wholly good, even though there is a deep inequality between an incorporeal being and a corporeal being. So the objection's answered. The best produces the best effect in its entirety, but that does not mean that every part of that effect, of the whole of that effect, is equally the best. So God does produce the best. His creation as a whole is the best, but not every part of that creation was created as the best. In other words, maybe this is a good lesson for us in modern society, that we, Aquinas is there to redirecting us from looking at creation as far as ourselves as individuals and toward seeing it as a whole, God's entire creation, a very different mindset. Okay, the first effect of unity is equality. So this was objection to if equality is the effect of unity. The second then is multiplicity. So Aquinas says, well, that's why the Son comes first. So the first effect of unity is equality, the Son. The second then is creatures. All right, number 3. This argument holds regarding distribution of rewards. For the perfection of the whole, inequality of the parts is necessary. Okay? Again, not talking about the problem of evil there. So we're going to get back to that soon. All right, so if inequality is part of God's wisdom, maybe we don't quite understand yet in this argument how that is. And we've accepted that multiplicity and diversity come from God. So does that mean then that there's a multiplicity of worlds as well? All right. If God created one world, it holds that he would create many, since his power is not limited to the creation of one. Many good things are better than a few. Therefore, it is better for there to be many good worlds than for there to be one. Everything that has a form in matter can be multiplied. The world has a form in matter. Therefore, it has multiplied. But John 1:10 speaks of the world in the singular. So the world is called one by a unity of order. All things are ordered to each other and ultimately to God. Thus all things belong to one world, to one natural order that ascends up to God. So much for parallel universes. All right. Objections answered. All things are arranged in one order to one end. Therefore, the unity of God proves the unity of the world. In other words, the things that this first article was trying to say about individual creatures are not true of individual creatures, but they are true of creation as a whole. The things that this argument in Article 3, the objections are trying to say about the world as a whole, are not true of the world as a whole, but they are true of individual creatures. Okay, a little confusing, but I think we can work through it and figure out what he's saying there. All right, the infinite is opposed to the notion of end. This argument would posit God has made an infinite number of worlds, and therefore there is no end of creation, right? The world is composed of the whole of matter. In other words, Aquinas is pulling a bit of a definitional argument here on us. He said, well, wait a second, what then do we mean when we say the world? Well, we mean the whole of matter, therefore it cannot be multiplied. All right, so that's it for question 47. Next time we get into the distinction of good and evil. Two articles that I think will be quite interesting. Or two questions I think there will be quite interesting, 48 and 49. So I'll be back in a few days with those. Till then, I'm Betty Bone. I'll talk to you later.